Welcome to Watch Symposium. I'm Austin, and you might have heard about the authorized dealer selling Rolex watches, Patek Philippe watches in Illinois that have been alleged to have had an out-the-back-door scheme for selling their watches. Now, link in the description to an article about that, but in this video, we're going to talk about the details. I've read the 52-page court filing, and we're going to get into the details. This will be a super interesting video, so please give it a thumbs up. Now, before we get into it, let me just stress that none of this has been adjudicated. These are all allegations, and so we don't know if this is true, all right? And I also reserve the right to make small, minor mistakes. I'm not intentionally doing that, but there's a lot to cover, and I might not get it all completely right. So now that's out of the way, let's talk about the setting. This took place in Illinois at CD Peacock, which is an authorized dealer selling Rolex and Patek Philippe watches. Now, essentially, this is a whistleblowing case, and there are 3 whistleblowers that allege that upper management and the sales staff at CD Peacock were selling watches, and there are quite a few allegations. It's not just limited to that, out the back door. All right, the players. Well, let's talk about the whistleblowers first. Now, if this were a story, and I suppose it is, some may say that these are the good guys, all right? These are the people that didn't want to play ball with the bad guys, and these are the people that tried to do the right thing. They ultimately got fired for it, all right? 3 of them, all right? The first, and we'll go in chronological order of when they were hired, Giuseppe. Giuseppe was hired in 2012. So when the nefarious activity allegedly started, he had been there for over 6 years, okay? Now, in 2016, another soon-to-be future whistleblower was hired. In 2016, Nelly came on board, all right? Again, they just wanted to do the right thing. Now, in 2017, a person named Hill, all right? I'll leave out his first name, but just we'll say Hill was hired. Now, he was hired to, quote, clean things up. And as we'll see, the allegations are that he very likely was hired not to clean things up, but to instigate the corruption or oversee it, all right? And then let's talk about the third whistleblower, and that's the main person who brought this case against them, Susanna. Susanna was hired in 2018. Now, Susanna was hired in 2018, and also another player who was instrumental in the scheme, a Chinese national named Ying Duan. They were hired around the same time. Now, both Susanna and Ying Duan had no jewelry selling experience, all right? They were new to this. Now, let's talk about Ying Duan, all right? So 2018, she was hired. The scheme really starts to get underway in 2019, and we'll talk about that. But who was she? Chinese national. She was in the States on a student visa, all right? Was she a student? No. But it seems that, and the allegations are as such, that CD Peacock brought her in, and there are some issues in regards to immigration. Well, that's what it's related to. She was a Chinese national, or is a Chinese national. She's likely back in China right now, that was working there, and she was, if these allegations are to be believed, the one doing the dirty work. She was doing the dirty work. She was the one who actually had her hand in selling the watches out the back door with the upper management's knowledge. And let's talk about the upper management. We have Seymour, the owner, and below him, Baum, sort of the CEO, all right? All right, so the scheme. Well, we've got our 3 soon-to-be whistleblowers 2018 comes and goes. 2019 comes. This is after the holidays. And they notice that the new girl, Ying Duan, the Chinese national, the student, well, sales were going crazy. I mean, here it is, early 2019. People aren't coming into the store, but she's selling watches like crazy. What's going on? Well, let me talk about Ying Duan for a second, because she, again, was the person actually allegedly doing the dirty work, and she worked closely with Hill. Now, we mentioned Hill. He was hired in 2017 to clean up the store. Now, he basically, if the allegations are to be believed, had a big hand in this, or at the very least, oversaw things, made sure that Ying Duan was free and clear to ply her trade. So let's get into the meat of what exactly Ying Duan was allegedly doing. Well, she was selling watches out the back door. And one thing you have to know about Rolex, you have to buy the watches on site, okay? And she was selling them to people far away, and we'll get to that. Also, pieces need to be de-stickered, and the sales associate, interesting bit of Rolex trivia, has to be wearing a Rolex necktie or a Rolex scarf at the time of sale. All right, well, I don't know if she committed a violation in regards to her uniform, but she, to put it lightly, was flagrantly and brazenly going against the rules set out by Rolex. And let me just say on a side note that Rolex, in a sense, is a victim in this as well, all right, because they weren't following protocol. Now, let me just interject here that the scheme taking place hinged on two things. One was the hiring of Ying Duan, all right, and the second was sales targets being established of $10 million. Sales staff were told that they needed to sell $10 million worth of stuff, and if so, Rolex would give them a bunch of stuff, do things for the store. Now, who imposed this $10 million worth of, target goals? Was it Rolex? Was it Seymour, the owner, or Baum, the CEO? I don't know, all right? But apparently that was a factor. Okay, so the meat of the scheme basically was Ying Duan selling the watches to people that weren't there. Now, she was selling them apparently through Facebook, through WeChat, through Instagram. There are alleged accounts of her communicating with people in Taiwan, and she was a Chinese national, so I don't think it's a far stretch to say that many, if not most, of these watches wound up in China. But she was brazen in the fact that she would tell people, I work for an authorized dealer, I have access to these pieces, and I can get your name on the card. And that was happening via social media. Of course, the watches being shipped out weren't de-stickered, and tax evasion seems to be something that's discussed in the report. And apparently Ying Duan would send empty boxes across state lines in order to allegedly not have to pay sales tax, all right? Sometimes she would send empty boxes to random addresses, like a Walgreens once. And so it's sort of unclear if she was sending them abroad or she was sending to people outside of Rolex, her connection on the outside, who lived in the United States, and then they would make it abroad. Or perhaps they stayed in the States, these watches. She got so brazen that she started paying for these watches with her own credit card. I'm talking $40,000 a pop watches that she was putting on her credit card. Multiple watches. I mean, you're looking at a guy with no more than $1,000 limit on his credit card, but here's an international student on a student visa who's buying tens of $1,000s worth of watches on her own credit card. And she would forge the signatures on the guarantee cards. That was back when you had to sign the guarantee cards. Sometimes she would write "Friend of Ying." Sometimes she would forge the names. Now, she was selling gold watches from $20,000 to $40,000, watches in bulk, like, you know, a bunch of watches at a time. Again, goes against what Rolex allows. So they were basically getting rid of the sort of hard to sell pieces, but they were also selling through her out the back door the hot models as well. Now, it's pretty clear that she had help outside the AD, because one time her boyfriend showed up with, and this is alleged, a lunchbox full of cash. And at this point, things were very brazen. She would leave open her social media. She was using her credit card in the store. She was forging things. I mean, she was just pretty much had no shame, and it was pretty much obvious. And this boyfriend shows up with a bunch of cash. Her and Hill, the guy who was hired to clean up the store, went into his office, and I guess it was her, perhaps the boyfriend, and Hill counting out these stacks of cash, some of which, of course, made it into the till as legitimate sales. Now, of course, a lot of this money allegedly went into their pockets, and Hill would often talk about this money and this whole scheme as their, quote, retirement plan. Now, it's hard to know whether the upper management, the owner, the CEO bomb was getting kickbacks, or if they were enjoying just all of the sales and then meeting this $10 million goal of a sales target that they had laid out. All right, guys, we're going to leave it right there. We're going to pick it up in part 2 and talk about the aftermath. But as we've left it is 2019. Ying Duan, she's selling watches out the back door like crazy. Hill is making sure everything goes smoothly. The upper management doesn't want to hear anything about it. And our 3 whistleblowers are just having a hard time, just trying to do the right thing and sell watches. Now, let me stress that everything in this video hasn't been adjudicated, and that they're all unproven allegations at this point. And so we don't know as to the truth of it. I'm just reporting what I've learned. Consider subscribing, drop a comment in the comment section, and hey, did you have fun? Is this interesting or what? Consider giving this a like. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.